Amen. Well, here we are again. What we found out is the world, A, did not blow up. B, it is still spinning. And C, it will probably continue to spin at least for the next hour. After that, who knows? But we just take this one day at a time. I'm hoping it spins this hour. Again, I don't know. We're in chapter 8 of Isaiah. This section, of chapter 7 through 11, is one big prophecy. And then there's this little interlude, then chapters 13 through 23, another section of prophecy. This section is having to deal with Israel and Judah, the northern and the southern kingdoms. The next section, that big block of prophecy between 13 and 23, deals with God's judgment on the nations. Now, these are interesting things. It's one thing for God to speak about his own people. We get that. We sometimes struggle with the idea that he can also speak to people or speak about people that don't know him. But as we saw last week, God is on the throne, not just over Israel and Judah. He's on the throne over the universe. And Isaiah really kind of drives that point home as we see God using other nations as instruments to bring about his punishment and his judgment on his own people. And then he's going to turn around and judge those other nations for their harsh treatment of his people. It's this thing that people struggle with, and we'll talk more about it when we get there. But right now, we're just kind of setting the stage for what is going to come. Who would like to read in chapter 8, verses 1 through 4 for me? Little chunk. Go for it, Susan.
Then the Lord said to me, take a large tablet and write upon it in common characters, belonging to Maher-shalal-hash-baz, something like that. And I get reliable witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Berechiah, to attest for me. And I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Maher-shalal-hash-baz. For before the child knows how to cry, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. Shouldn't have volunteered before reading the big.
Well, you got it out of the way. That's good. In a nutshell, this is it. God is telling Isaiah, I want you to take a scroll. I want you to write something on it. And what he wrote really means quick to the plunder, swift to the spoil. And then he says, I'm going to have these two faithful witnesses who are going to watch you do this. Uriah, the priest, his name means Jehovah is my light. And Zechariah means Jehovah remembers. So the image in all of this is that God is reminding Isaiah and through him, the people, that I am speaking to you through these people. We talked a little bit last week about how names, especially in the Old Testament, really have a meaning. They're not just a name, but it's also, it kind of tells a story. And the story of the name of his son, Maher-shalal-hash-baz, or Baz for short, his name signifies what is going to happen. Swift, quick to the plunder, swift to the spoil. This is what is going to happen when the Assyrians come in. It's going to move quickly. It's going to be swift, and they are going to carry off a whole bunch of stuff, including people. With me so far? Yes, hold on.
Do we know who his prophet wife is? Is she named?
The prophetess. That's all we know.
Okay.
Mrs. Isaiah. Yes, Catherine.
I noticed when we were listening to it from yesterday, we're talking about that 7:14, and it kind of carries back into this. When they were talking about the Lord himself will give you a sign, the virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son. In my footnotes, it talks about the fact that he was betrothed to a young woman, and that also, Alma can refer to a woman about to be married. So you talked about foreshadowing Jesus, but it sounds like he was talking about this situation where he was going to marry someone and have a baby boy.
That's how some people interpret it.
Well, can it be both? I mean,
It can, but he's also had a son already before that was taking place. The classical interpretation of it is pointing to Jesus. Because if we look at it in just the short, immediate term, which is a possible interpretation of it, don't get me wrong, it narrows the scope of what that prophecy is.
Okay, in the footnotes, it was saying that his first wife had died, and that was his son. And then he married this girl, and they had another son.
Yep. And again, it's kind of splitting hairs, and it gets us off track of what the bigger overall picture is. I tend to look at what the church has historically taken that prophecy to be.
Okay.
And there's two schools on Isaiah. One is a classical historical approach that the church has carried through. One is a more modern liberal approach that tends to break it down into more intellectual chunks. They won't even say that Isaiah was written by one person. It was two, maybe three Isaiahs. And that interpretation of the prophecy comes out of that school of thought. Not that it's wrong. I just don't like it.
Okay.
Because it conflicts with what the church has historically taught. And for me, at the end of the day, that's what I take precedent over, is the historical classical interpretations. But thank you. Thank you. But what it means is that Isaiah isn't alone in this. And it reminds me a lot of the prophet Jeremiah, who is really just kind of an object lesson for God to use for the people. At one point, he has them lay on his side for several years. Another time, he has them lay on his other side. He has him write things. He has him name things. He has him name his sons some pretty nasty stuff. He names his wife. And it's fascinating how God will use everything to get his point across. And here he's going to go into this analogy of water. And it's, who would like to read chapter or verse 5 through, let's go through 9 for me. Steve, go for it.
The Lord spoke to me again. Because this people has refused the waters of Shiloh that flow gently and melted fear before Rezin and the son of Ramallah. Therefore the Lord is bringing up against it the mighty flood waters of the river. The king of Assyria in his glory will rise above all the channels and overflow all the banks. It will sweep on into Judah as a flood, and pouring over it will reach up to the neck. And its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel.
Thanks. I love this analogy. The people are rejecting the gentle flowing waters of Shiloh, this image of a beautiful water that flows from one pool to the other in Jerusalem. Gentle, calm. That's what God is offering. That's what God wants the people to accept. But instead, they want something different. They rejoice over Rezin, the king of Aram, the king of that country just to the north of them. And I love how he doesn't even name Pekah, the king of the northern territories, northern tribes. He just calls him the son of Remaliah. He has so much disdain for that northern king, he won't even call him by name. Think of that. This is God. It's kind of like when you're mad at somebody, you go, oh, that person. We don't want to name them because naming somebody that we're angry with, it kind of gives them a little agency. And this is more like, that idiot, that guy. That's the attitude God has towards all of this. How does that set with our image of a loving, forgiving God? Remember, he's talking about his own people here. Kind of makes you go, yeah, God must be really ticked. He's also saddened because he's offering his people this peace. And he describes it as that gentle flowing water. They're rejecting it, and what he's going to bring them is that torrent, that flood that's going to flow coming out of Assyria. And it's going to overflow the banks, and it's going to pass through everything. Kind of get that image of the last couple of hurricanes that we've had down south. It's not a gentle rain. It's not a flowing stream. It's a flood. It's a flood water that's going to come in and destroy everything in its path. That's what God is promising.
Are we talking about the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom at this point?
This is the northern kingdom.
Oh, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, this is the northern kingdom right now. Yes, Marilyn.
But he calls it his land Emmanuel. What's that
Yep.
about?
What does Emmanuel mean?
God is with us.
God is with us. Yeah. It's basically he's saying, I'm going to destroy this land, but I'm still with you. And sometimes that's hard to fathom. That God will allow something horrible to happen, but yet he's still with us. Not to get political, but that's a lesson that we could kind of hang on to after last week. God is still with us. No matter what, God is still with us. Who would like to read 9? Oh, let's just do 9 and 10, please. Hulda, would you like to? I'm curious about what the message says.
Sure. But face the facts, all you oppressors, and then wring your hands. Listen, all of you far and near. Prepare for the worst and wring your hands. Yes, prepare for the worst and wring your hands. Plan and plot all you want, nothing will come of it. All your talk is mere talk, empty words. Because when all is said and done, the last word is Emmanuel, God with us.
Thanks. I love that.
Yeah, I like that.
I love that. Because basically that's what he's saying. It's like you guys plot and scheme and plan all you want. God is still in charge. It's one of the many places in Isaiah where he addresses this whole idea of the plans of men versus the plans of God. And at this time, what's happening is you had the northern kingdom, Israel, aligning with Syria or Aram, that country directly to the north. They had both tried to attack Jerusalem in the past individually, and now they're coming together as an alliance to come and threaten the southern kingdom. And God is telling Isaiah, they can plot and plan and scheme all they want. Don't be afraid. It's not going to happen. But behind all that, he's saying the Assyrians, that big empire to the north and east, they're the ones who are going to come. Don't worry about these little guys because the big guys are going to be the ones to come in.
Mhm.
Who would like to read verse 11 through 17 for me, please? Helen had her hand up first. Sorry, Vita. She's too fast for you.
For the Lord spoke thus to me while his hand was strong upon me, and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, do not call conspiracy all that the people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what it fears, or be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him who you shall regard as holy, let him be your fear, let him be your dread. He will become a sanctuary, a stone one strikes against for both houses of Israel. He will become a rock one stumbles over, a trap, a snare for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble. They shall fall and be broken, and they shall be snared and taken. More?
Yeah, the next two verses too, please.
Okay. Bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. See, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts, who dwells on Mount Zion.
Thank you. He's telling Isaiah, especially, and the people in the southern kingdom, he's saying, don't worry about what they're doing. Don't get all caught up in the conspiracies. Don't fear what they fear. Don't dread what they dread, but trust in the Lord Almighty. It's easier said than done, isn't it? I think of what's been going on the last week in our own nation. There's a lot of talk, a lot of chatter, a lot of clatter, and it's real easy for people to get sucked into that rabbit hole about all of the possible things that are going to happen and go wrong. Anybody relate to that? Yeah. Yeah. People are petrified. Some people are convinced that the economy is going to tank and they're going to be out on the street desperate. Other people are feared that, because of their sexual orientation, that they're going to have to wear a black armband and, just like the Jews had to wear the yellow Star of David. Others are fearing that they're going to be deported. Our nation is in turmoil right now. And if we allow ourselves to get sucked down those conspiracy rabbit holes, next thing you know, they're coming for us. And what Isaiah has been told, and what he's supposed to tell the people, is that, hang on, you, Isaiah, and your two sons with those names, are witnesses to God's power. Yes, there's going to be a remnant that returns. Yes, there's going to be a nation that's going to come in quickly and take things off. That's the promise. But hang on. I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob. I will put my trust in him. Can you relate to that? Can you relate to a God that sometimes seems hidden, especially in tough times? I think we all can.
I think he's always there. It's just that we forget to call on him. It's
Yeah.
because we're panicky.
Yep. I just keep thinking of Jesus's words on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?
He didn't.
Of course, at that time, God had turned his back on Jesus. He had walked away. But we go through those times where it doesn't seem like God is there. Whether it's our physical world, our personal world, our health, our emotions, whatever it is, we go through these periods where God seems absent. But he's there. And you put your trust in him. We put our trust in the one we can't see. And sometimes we don't even feel. But we just trust. That's not always easy to do, is it? No. And God understands that. That's the good part about it. I think for me, the best part of scripture that kind of defines all of that is in Psalm 13, where David is crying out. He's going, "Where are you? How come you're not answering me? I call to you and nothing happens, but yet I trust." It's that emotional roller coaster that we go through, that you get angry, you call out, you ask questions. And as we're doing that, God is speaking to our hearts. And we get to that point that we just go, huh, okay, had to get that out. But God, I know you're still there. I can't express how important that is for us as a church, as a nation, as individuals. Sometimes we just have to get the out of the way. And that allows us to listen to that still small voice of God that is speaking right here to our hearts. It's not always pretty when we go emotionally. Sometimes we even have to go spiritually. But until we get that junk out of the way, we can't hear that still small voice of God speaking to us. Now, Isaiah was told to write all this on a scroll. We don't have that scroll. Well, we do. We don't have the one that Isaiah wrote on. We have the one that God has placed on our hearts. We have his word, and we have the Spirit to guide us. And so in those times where we just feel like God's not here, he's not listening, my prayer is that once we get through that initial shock, that he gives us ears to hear what he's truly saying and speaking. Who would like to read 19 through 22 for me? Vita, go for it.
And when they say to you, consult the mediums and the wizards who chirp and mutter, should not a people consult their God? Should they consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the teaching and to the testimony. Surely for this word which they speak there is no dawn. They will pass through the land, greatly distressed and hungry, and when they are hungry, they will be enraged and will curse their king and their God and turn their faces upward. And they will look to the earth, but behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness.
Thank you. In Isaiah's time, just as in our time, people were quick to turn to other sources for guidance and wisdom. They were looking to spiritualists, mediums, people to consult the dead. Today we go to psychics and horoscopes and all of those things to figure out the course of our life. And what God tells Isaiah is that when you rely on that, you're just going to wander around. He uses that image of people just wandering around the countryside, looking for anything, getting angry, turning their face towards God, and cursing God, cursing the land, versus putting their trust in God and being led by the Spirit. One brings peace. The other brings chaos and confusion. And Isaiah is warning the people here, don't trust the chaos and confusion bringers. Trust God. That makes sense. Do people still do that? Yeah, Vita.
I think there's so much noise that there's so much more noise than there was years ago that we all have to make such an effort to tune that out in order to listen. And I'm not always successful. It's a constant effort.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard sometimes to hear, but it's what we need to do. We need to be able to tune out the clutter. It's like when I was a kid and we'd be driving across the state or across the country and listening to the baseball game on the radio, and you get further and further away from the Twin Cities. And even though the signal might be strong, sometimes it was drifting a little bit off. And so you had to take the knob and turn the dial a little bit to get that signal locked in. So you pick up WCCO in the middle of South Dakota. That's what the Holy Spirit is like. There's times when we are locked in. And then there's times that the signal is drifting. Except unlike the radio, it's not Jesus that is moving. It's us that tend to kind of step outside of the frequency. And that's where we need to be able to get ourselves back locked in. That's where those spiritual disciplines and practices come in. That's where taking time to pray and seek God and read his word, all of those things help us to keep locked into that signal. And now more than ever, with all of the clutter and clatter that's available, all you have to do is turn on your phone and look on the internet and see what's running around out there. There's a lot of noise, a lot of noise. And the more we can learn to put our trust in him, the more we will be able to filter out that noise. Who would like to read in chapter 9, verses 1 through 4 for me? Let's go 1 through 6. Marilyn, go for it.
Okay, they're doing some final yard work, and I think the blowers are finally gone because it sounded like the living room. Okay, chapter 9, 1 through 6. But there will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. But later on, he shall make it glorious by the way of the sea, on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. Thou shalt multiply the nation, thou shalt increase their gladness. They will be glad in thy presence as with the gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For thou shalt break the yoke of their burden and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor as at the battle of Midian. For every boot of the booted warrior in the battle tumult and cloak rolled in blood will be for burning, fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace.
Thanks.
Handel's Messiah.
Yes.
Messiah. Yep.
No doubt this time.
Pardon, Steve?
No doubt this time.
Right.
Speaking about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, does it refer to his first coming or his second coming? Or both?
Both, I think.
I think it's both.
Both.
Yeah. What a beautiful image. What a fantastic message to bring after you've basically just brought this message of doom and gloom and destruction. You step into that and you say, but unto us this child is born. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Those are all titles for Jesus, names for Jesus. Totally different image than that of a rushing floodwater that's going to sweep in and wipe everything out. That to me is the beauty of Isaiah. Because in the midst of all these prophecies about judgment and gloom and doom and destruction, there's this underlying thread of hope. And the hope that Isaiah keeps leaving out for us to grab is the Messiah. It's Jesus. The people are going to lose sight of that. We still lose sight of that today in the midst of the gloom and doom and destruction and floods and everything. We lose sight. But if we're looking for true peace, it's only through Jesus that we get that. The peace he offers now is an internal peace. The peace he offers when he returns will be an external peace. He will put an end to this mess that we have in the world. The wars, the fighting, all of that stuff will stop when he returns. Sometimes we hope he would do that now. He's not. That's not his purpose now. as if we looked back to our past study when we looked at Revelation. When does the peace come? Yeah, the peace shows up at the end of the book. It's the same with Isaiah here. He has that two-pronged approach to prophecy. Catherine alluded to that, the now and then the later. And that first coming is going to be planting the seeds, and it's going to be bringing the peace to individuals. The second time he comes, the second time when he returns, he will set up shop and he will be king and rule. Right now, he rules in us. He rules in the church. Not perfectly in either place because we're still human and we still like to struggle and have our ways. But eventually, it will all come to fruition. Who would like to read 7? Just basically chapter 7 or verse 7. Should have had this included in the other one. That's my fault. Steve, go for it.
His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do it.
Thanks.
So
Yeah, it's just that
am I
continuing.
gathering that Isaiah is saying God has turned his face away from Judah now in the present, but things will change and there'll be joy and liberation and justice.
Yep.
But it'll be because of a child has been born to us, a son. I mean, it's really foreshadowing that Jesus is going to change everything.
Yep. There will be an
deal.
interim. There will be an interim time right after they're carried off into captivity where that faithful remnant will return. And they will establish a kingdom again. But what Isaiah is talking about here is, when Jesus comes.
Now, he has no hint here of the timing. I mean, there's nothing in
Nope.
the book. He's not saying this will be 20 days or 800 years or whatever it turned out to actually be.
The only hints of timing we get are very few. We saw one at the very beginning when he's talking about his son. It says before he's even old enough to say mommy and daddy, or before he's like 2 years old, Assyria is coming. That's that immediate prophecy timing. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about prophecy, that's our struggle. Is he talking about the short term? Is he talking about next week, next month, next year? Is he talking about 10 years from now, 100 years from now? Or is he talking about the end of the age? Sometimes from the context, we get a little better understanding. Now, we have the hindsight of looking back historically and saying, oh, yeah, this is talking about when Jesus was born. At the time of Isaiah, they had no idea. But just like in our time, we have no idea about that second coming, that return. We're just kind of in the middle of limbo here as we're going through waiting. And that's not always easy to do, is to wait. Imagine what Christmas would be like, especially for a little kid, if you had no idea when it was coming. When you're really young, you really don't understand. calendars and dates and holidays don't make a lot of sense to us. But you look for the signs. Oh, I see Christmas trees. They're putting up decorations. They're playing Christmas songs. Well, nowadays playing Christmas songs, I mean, it's like after Thanksgiving or Halloween. But we start to get those signs of what's to come. Then as we get a little bit older, we understand that Christmas comes the same time every year. But with prophecy, we don't have that certainty. We have the promise of something that's going to come. And sometimes we get little hints of signs to look for. And this is one of those signs. Virgin will give birth. Now he switches again and he's talking about unto us a child is born. But until the clouds part and Jesus marches back down as a conquering hero, all we can do is wait. All we can do is wait. And that's all that the people of Judah could do at that time, was wait. Why do you think God does it that way? Why doesn't he just give us a time and a date?
It's about having faith.
Yeah. Yeah. If we knew that Jesus was going to return January 14th, 2032, if we had that date, what do you think would happen between now and then? I think a lot of people will go out and live life and party until December, and then they're going to say, "Oh, I think I better turn back to Jesus here."
Yep. Party time.
Yep. It's all about walking in faith. That's what this whole section is about. It's that trust, that faith, to not get distracted by what's going on around you. Who would like to read verses 8 through 12, please? Go for it, Marilyn.
The Lord sends a message against Jacob, and it falls on Israel, and all the people know it, that is, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, asserting in pride and in arrogance of heart, the bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with smooth stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will replace them with cedars. Therefore the Lord raises against them adversaries from Rezin and spurs their enemies on, the Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west. And they devour Israel with gaping jaws. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out.
Thanks. He's speaking to the arrogance and the pride of the northern kingdom here. Yeah, things have fallen down. Our houses have been destroyed, but we're going to rebuild even finer. Yeah, our trees are gone, our crops are gone, but we're going to have more. They're still not seeing the gravity of what God is doing. And he is going to bring people from the east and from the south, and they are going to destroy the northern kingdom. 4 times actually in this section, we see the words, yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. What an image of God. Yes, Helen.
I thought the Assyrians were going to destroy northern.
They are.
But
They are.
it's the Philistines and whoever the Arameans.
Yep. Aram, Syria. Let's see. Let me do something here. Yeah, figure out where is that.
My translation says Syrians.
Yeah. Let's do this again. Okay, here's our map from last time.
Yeah.
Here is the northern kingdom. Here is the southern kingdom. This is Syria or Aram. This is Assyria, that big, bad, powerful kingdom that's going to come in. Syria here and Israel here, the northern kingdom, have formed an alliance. And they think they're pretty strong. Even though they're going to get knocked down, they think that they're pretty strong and they'll withstand. But what God is saying is that it's going to be these guys, the Assyrian Empire, that is going to come in and carry off the northern kingdom.
Because the Philistines are right where Gaza is now, isn't it?
Yep, they're to the west.
Yeah.
So when Assyria comes in, the Philistines are going to look and say, oh, okay, we've had this running battle with these guys for a long time. Let's come join the party. Only the problem is they're going to get swept up as well.
Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of this big convoluted mess. As you've got peoples from all around the northern kingdom who are going to be looking for opportunities to join in with the Assyrians. Not too many are going to be excited about fighting against the Assyrians because these are the big boys on the block right now. But at first, they're going to look at joining in with Aram or Syria, that kingdom to the north, and Judah is going to be the target. But at the end of the day, Jerusalem and Judah are going to stand for a while.
For a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
For a while. Let's see. Let's do one more section. Who would like to read? Who would like to read 13 through 17 for me? Go for it, Susan.
The people did not turn to him who smote them, nor seek the Lord of hosts. So the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail, palm branch and reed in one day. The elder and honored man is the head, and the prophet who teaches lies is the tail. For those who lead this people lead them astray, and those who are led by them are swallowed up. Therefore, the Lord does not rejoice over their young men, and has no compassion on their fatherless and widows. For everyone is godless and an evildoer, and every mouth speaks folly. For all this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still.
Let's keep going. Let's go all the way to the end of the chapter.
Do you want me to keep reading?
Sure.
For wickedness burns like a fire. It consumes briars and thorns. It kindles the thickets of the forest, and they roll upward in a column of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts, the land is burned, and the people are like fuel for the fire. No man spares his brother. They snatch on the right, but are still hungry. They devour on the left, but are not satisfied. Each devours his neighbor's flesh. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, and together they are against Judah. For all this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still.
Thanks. When the time comes, when this all starts to come to a head, it's going to be confusion and chaos in the northern kingdom. They're supposed to be united with Syria or Aram to the north. They're supposed to be united against Judah, against the south. But when push comes to shove, they're going to start to turn on one another. That's going to be what's going to bring about their destruction, is they can't even come together enough to fight a common enemy. And God is going to cause confusion. There's going to be famine. There's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to be harmful to the people. But yet, his anger is not turned away and his hand is still upraised. In other words, it's still coming. And I think we're going to stop there for today, but we're starting to get this picture now of what's to come. There is going to be a time unlike they've seen in a long time. In the past, when there has been an enemy, God has raised up a champion to rally the people to defeat the enemy. There was that reference earlier about Midian's defeat. That's not going to happen this time. God is not going to send somebody riding in on a white horse to rescue them from what's going to happen. And that is going to shatter their faith. Because this has been a proud, arrogant people who have put their trust in themselves. And then, well, God will bail us out. You know, when things get really bad, God's going to bail us out. We'll be okay. And that's not going to happen. And that's going to leave the people struggling. That's going to leave them confused. That's going to anger a lot of them because their idea of God has just been shaken. But that's where that promise of a faithful remnant carries forth. God is going to use this coming time as a way of weeding out who is truly following him and who's not. It's kind of like that shaking out and seeing what is truly valuable. It's not pretty. It's not pretty when God does that. And he's only doing this as a last resort because the people have simply turned away and started following other gods, even though he's called them time and time again to return. They've just kind of said, yeah, you don't really mean it. This time God means it. Any questions? For unto us a child is born. That's what we get to hang on to. I love that Advent's just around the corner. Because that's our promise. For unto us a child is born. In the midst of all of the junk and hurt and anger, we get that promise of a Savior. We get that promise of peace and that hope for a future to come. And I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'm just going to start going on to the next chapters and we'll be here for the next 3 weeks, but we'll take our time to get there. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Basil.